Hello, hello, hi, Facebook Trooper. What's happening? What's going on? Welcome. Happy Friday. In hopes that you squeezed more out of your day than the day squeezed out of you. Welcome. Good to see you. If you're joining me live, let me know you're here. If you're catching the replay, I would love to get your feedback. I would appreciate that. We would all appreciate that. Hey, tonight I want to talk about this one simple strategy that you and I can implement right away, and it will cut down on our laziness. How about that, huh? I know I'm all in for that because sometimes I do find myself being lazy and not wanting to do the work. I don't know if you feel ever that way, but I have certainly felt that way before in the past, and then you feel like guilty afterwards and you didn't do the work and all this stuff. So why not just not be lazy? So I'm going to talk about this one simple strategy, and I picked it up from, I'm going to talk about this book again, Atomic Habits by James Clear. If you haven't got this book or read this book, this is a money book in the bank. This is such a good book. But, and I've talked about it before, but this one simple strategy he talks about, it's worth paying attention to. So he talks about, there's a story in the book he talks about Twyla Thorpe, right? She is a famous dance choreographer and instructor, and she trains for, still to this day, she trains for a couple hours a day. Now she's in her like 50s or 60s, and she still trains, and she's been training for decades and years, for a long time, pretty much dancing her whole entire life, right? But she doesn't actually focus on the exercise habit. Isn't that interesting? For someone who's been dancing all her life, who's been exercising all her life, pretty much, she doesn't focus on exercising. How's that even possible when somebody is been exercising all their life? They don't focus on exercising. If you're joining me live, let me know you're here. Would love to know who's here, who's not here, right? So she doesn't focus on the exercise. So what does she focus on? Hey Susie, how are you? Welcome. Good to see you. So what does she focus on? The habit that she focuses on is, she says, I put on my workout clothes and my sweatshirt, and I hailed a cab on the side of the street. And if I've done that, then I've completed the habit. How cool is that, right? And I think that insight that she realized is that habits are often the entry point, not the end point. This is such a powerful point. Habits are often the entry point. Like as you're entering the action, you're about to do something. Not at the end when you've completed it and you're done with it. Habits are often the entry point, not the end point. So in that example, they're the cab, not the gym. See, the gym was the end because she's going to get to the gym. But the cab is the habit, getting to the cab, not the exercise. You feel me? Big, huge point. This is such a huge point, right? They're like an entrance ramp to the bigger routines in your life, right? And if you can master that habit, that tiny little decisive moment that determines what happens in the next chunk of time, then the rest of it kind of falls into place, right? So you gotta master that habit. You gotta that little chunk of time, that's that small time in the beginning, that is when you're gonna determine what to do, right? Like the author talks about him having this moment each day or each morning where either he opens the Evernote app and he starts to write the next article that he's working on, or he turns on ESPN, right? And he checks the sports stats, right? And he says what happens in the next hour is really determined by what happens in the first 30 minutes, 30 seconds, right? Because if he decides to go to ESPN, then the next hour is kind of shot, right? But if he starts writing the article, if he masters that entry point, then he's speeding in the right direction and the momentum carries them into the rest of the day. Do you see that? So it's not about the article. It's about that first 30 seconds that you take, that you decide, that decisive moment, that little chunk of time. That is so powerful, because if we shift our focus, let's say, for example, the gym example, right? If we shift our focus on just putting our clothes on and walking out the door, instead of, hey, being at the gym for an hour, that's a lot. That's a whole different mindset, and it's going to help you, because it's going to help you and let's throw me in there too, because why? Because you're not focusing on that grandiose of a task. You're just focusing on this little tiny chunk of time that you just have to put your clothes on and walk out the door and get in your car, right? Now, that can be inspiring when it comes to building habits, because what you realize is that there's actually not that much to change. You feel me? There may be 5 or 10 of those little decisive moments, those small entry points throughout your day, right? That determine whether the next chunk of time is going to be productive or not productive. There's only like 5 or 10 of them, right? 5 to 10 of them during the day that you gotta, that 30, that small chunk of time that you gotta decide. And if you can organize your environment, or join a community, or restructure your habits so that those entry points are mastered, then you are much more likely to live a good, productive day. How cool is that, right? I mean, just that little portion out of this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Whoops. I don't know what to do. James Clear, Atomic Habits. Great book, right? And he talks about this one little strategy. And the strategy is, don't focus on the end, focus on the entry point. That entry point is where you actually say, you know what, I just got to get my clothes on and walk out the door, right? That entry point is the key to pretty much everything, right? Because when you think about it, if you don't decide to do it, everything's already shut, right? If you decide to go right to ESPN versus writing an article or reading a book in the morning, or hey, I'm guilty of it, going right to the phone, maybe the next hour is already set, right? Maybe you and I do need to change those habits. Maybe you and I do need to focus on the entry points a lot more. Hopefully, you got some love, some inspiration, some value from this live. I appreciate you guys. I want to know what you think about this interesting strategy out of this book. And if you read the book, then I want to know your feedback. Throw some love down in the comments below. Let this feed grow. I appreciate you guys. I definitely want to know what you think. Hey, maybe you can even share with me, what is that entry point for you that's a challenge? Maybe it's the gym. Maybe it's going to work on time. Maybe it's putting a little time aside to do your side gig, whatever it may be, right? So maybe you want to share that with us. Drop your comments below. Like I said, let this feed grow. I appreciate you guys. And until tomorrow, where we do it all over again. Much love.